AITA for telling my sister I'm not watching her kids after she dumped them on me last minute? I, 29F, have always had a complicated relationship with my older sister, Sarah, 34F. Growing up, Sarah was the golden child. Everyone in our family catered to her, and she seemed to get away with everything. That dynamic followed us into adulthood, especially after Sarah got married and had kids. Sarah has 2 kids, Ellie, 8, and Jake, 5, who are great but very energetic. I love them, but I don't have kids myself, and my life is pretty full with work, friends, and hobbies. I'm not someone who's just sitting around waiting for things to do. However, Sarah seems to think I have unlimited free time, and she regularly dumps her responsibilities on me, mostly in the form of last-minute babysitting. For the past few years, Sarah has made it a habit of calling me out of the blue and saying things like, "I need you to watch the kids for a few hours," or "Something came up. Can you help?" At first, I'd agree because I felt guilty. Family is family, right? But these emergencies almost always turned out to be things like spa appointments, dinner dates with her husband, or casual shopping trips. They were rarely, if ever, actual emergencies. The tipping point for me came about 6 months ago. I had a really important work presentation that I'd been preparing for weeks. The night before, Sarah called me, practically begging me to watch the kids because her babysitter canceled last minute. She promised it was just for an hour, and I caved. Well, that 1 hour turned into 5, and I missed a crucial meeting the next morning because I was too exhausted to finish my prep work. When I asked her why she needed me so urgently, she brushed it off and said, "Oh, I just had dinner plans with a friend." "You're better at handling them anyway." I was furious, but I didn't say much at the time because I didn't want to create drama. Since then, I've started saying no more often. Sarah doesn't take it well. Every time I refuse, she gets passive-aggressive and says things like, "I guess I just can't rely on you for anything," or "You'd think you'd want to spend time with your niece and nephew." She even told our parents once, who called me to guilt-trip me into helping her out. Last week, though, things reached a boiling point. Last week, I was getting ready for a much-needed weekend away. I had been planning this trip for months, just a quiet getaway to recharge. My bags were packed, my work was wrapped up, and I was ready to leave Friday afternoon. At around 10 a.m. that day, Sarah called me. As soon as I saw her name pop up on my phone, I knew something was up. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up. "Hey, I need you to watch Ellie and Jake tonight," she said, her voice rushed but not panicked. I sighed, already annoyed. "Sarah, I told you I'm leaving town this afternoon. I can't." She groaned dramatically. "I know, but my sitter canceled again, and I have this really important event tonight. Can't you just leave tomorrow?" "Morning or something?" "Sarah, no. I've had this trip planned for weeks. You can't just dump the kids on me last minute." She scoffed. "Wow, okay. So you can't make a small sacrifice for your family? It's one night, and I'd do it for you if the roles were reversed." I almost laughed. Sarah had never once done anything like that for me, and we both knew it. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't. Maybe you can call Mom or Dad. They're busy, and you're literally the only person I can ask right now," she snapped. "Why are you being so selfish?" At that point, I was done. "Look, I can't help you this time. I'm sorry, but you'll need to figure something else out." She hung up on me, and I thought that was the end of it. But oh, no, Sarah had other plans. Around 1 p.m., as I was finishing up my packing, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Ellie and Jake standing there, holding their little overnight bags. Sarah was already back in her car, waving at me like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, storming outside. She rolled down her window. "I told you I had no one else. You're better. With them anyway. I'll be back tomorrow morning." Then she sped off before I could say another word. I was furious. Ellie and Jake stood there looking confused, and I didn't want to take my anger out on them. They're just kids, after all. But inside, I was livid. I canceled my trip, brought them inside, and called Sarah over and over, but she ignored all my calls. That night, as I was putting the kids to bed, Ellie innocently said, "Mommy said you didn't want to watch us because you don't like us." That broke me. I reassured her that wasn't true and that I loved them. But I was fuming. How dare Sarah manipulate her kids like that? The next morning, Sarah showed up at my house around 10 a.m. completely unbothered, as if nothing had happened. She strolled up the driveway with a coffee in hand and a cheerful smile, greeting Ellie and Jake like she hadn't dumped them on me less than 24 hours earlier. "Oh, thank you so much for watching them," she said, walking past me into the house. "I owe you one." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Are you serious, Sarah? You didn't even ask. You just dropped them off and left." She rolled her eyes and waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on. It wasn't that big of a deal. You're great with them, and it was just one night." "It's not just one night," I shot back. "You completely disregarded my plans, ignored my no, and forced this on me. That's not okay." Sarah crossed her arms and gave me that smug look she always uses to make me feel small. "You're being dramatic. Family helps family, and you're acting like I asked you to. Watch them for a week. It was one night, and you're not even busy. What's the big deal?" I felt my blood boiling. "You didn't ask, Sarah. You dumped your kids on me and left me no choice. I canceled my trip because of you. And now Ellie thinks I don't like her because of the garbage you told her. Do you even realize what you're doing to them?" For a split second, Sarah looked guilty, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "They're kids. They'll forget about it. And honestly, you're acting so self-righteous. You don't even have kids. You have no idea how hard it is. I didn't have any other options." "Then maybe you should stop treating me like a free babysitter," I snapped. "You've been pulling this crap for years, Sarah, and I'm done. If you can't respect my boundaries, don't expect me to be here for you anymore." Sarah's face turned red, and she stared at me like I'd just insulted her entire existence. "Wow. So that's how it is? You're just going to abandon your niece and nephew because you're too selfish to help your own family? Fine, I see how it is." She grabbed Ellie and Jake's hands and stormed out without another word. The kids looked confused and upset, but I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me into apologizing for standing up for myself. After Sarah left with Ellie and Jake, the silence in the house was deafening. I was drained, mentally, emotionally, and physically. For a moment, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. But then I remembered the years of manipulation, the countless times Sarah had ignored my no, and the way she had used guilt as a weapon to get her way. I couldn't keep enabling her behavior, not at the expense of my own well-being. The fallout from our confrontation didn't take long to hit. By the end of the day, my phone was blowing up with texts from family members. "How could you abandon Sarah like that? She's a single mom. You could have helped her just this once. You know how hard her life is. Family is supposed to stick together. You're being selfish." I was furious. Sarah had clearly gone to our family and spun some sob story, conveniently leaving out the part where she dropped the kids off without my consent. I tried to explain my side to the few relatives who called instead of texting, but most of them didn't want to hear it. To them, I was the bad guy for not sacrificing everything to make Sarah's life easier. The only person who fully understood was my best friend, Amanda. When I told her what had happened, she didn't hesitate to back me up. "You've been too nice to her for too long," Amanda said. "Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. If your family can't see that, it's their problem, not yours." Her words were a comfort, but the tension with my family weighed heavily on me. Over the next few days, I noticed a shift in how people treated me. Some relatives stopped responding to my messages altogether, and others made passive-aggressive comments in our family group chat. "Must be nice to have so much free time you can afford to turn down your own family," one cousin wrote. I wanted to fire back, but I decided it wasn't worth the energy. Let them think what they want, I told myself. I knew the truth. A week later, Sarah called me out of the blue. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I was ready for another confrontation. "Hey," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Can we talk?" I sighed. "What is it, Sarah?" "I've been thinking about what you said," she admitted. "And I guess I've been taking you for granted. I didn't mean to make you feel like you don't have a choice. I'm sorry." Her apology caught me off guard. For years, Sarah had refused to take accountability for her actions, and I wasn't sure if this was genuine or just another tactic to smooth things over. "I appreciate the apology," I said cautiously. "But Sarah, this can't happen again. If you need help, you need to ask beforehand, and you need to respect my answer, whether it's yes or no." "I get it," she said quietly. "I'll try to do better." It wasn't exactly the heartfelt reconciliation I'd hoped for, but it was a start. After Sarah apologized during that phone call, I really wanted to believe she was going to change. I hoped that maybe this incident would finally be the wake-up call she needed to stop taking me for granted. But, well, old habits die hard. A few days after her apology, Sarah sent me a long text. It was polite enough, but still had a slightly manipulative tone. She asked if I could take the kids for an entire weekend because she desperately needed some time for herself. At first, I was conflicted. I do love Ellie and Jake, and I understand how tough it must be for Sarah to raise 2 kids on her own. But I also remembered what so many of you pointed out. Sarah has a history of turning helping out into her dumping all her responsibilities onto me. I didn't want to fall back into that cycle. I replied with something along the lines of, "I'm happy to help on occasion if you give me advance notice and it's something I can manage, but I'm not in a position to commit to an entire weekend." Her response? Silence. She didn't even acknowledge my text. Then, a couple of days later, I found out through our family group chat that Sarah had vented to everyone about how disappointed she was in me for abandoning her when she needed me most. Cue another flood of angry messages from relatives. "It's just one weekend. Why are you being so cold? You're punishing those poor kids because you don't like Sarah." It was infuriating. No one seemed to care about how much Sarah's constant dumping had worn me down, or the fact that I had my own life to manage. I eventually left the group chat because I couldn't deal with the toxicity anymore. What hurt the most, though, was when one of my aunts, someone I'd always been close to, called me selfish. She said Sarah was just trying her best, and that I should be more understanding since I don't have kids of my own, and couldn't possibly understand what it's like. That really stung. I know I'm not a parent, but does that mean I'm obligated to take on someone else's responsibilities just because they're overwhelmed? Where's the line between helping out and being taken advantage of? Update. Hey everyone, it's been a while since I posted my original story, and I finally had some time to process everything that's been happening over the last month or so. First, I just want to thank everyone who took the time to comment, message, or offer support. Honestly, I wasn't expecting such a strong response. It's been tough, and reading through your advice and stories gave me a lot of comfort and clarity. So, let me catch you up on what's been going on. After that huge blow-up with Sarah about me refusing to watch her kids last minute, things got, well, a little complicated. I thought I was setting a clear boundary, and I really thought she would respect it. Unfortunately, I don't think Sarah really understands what boundaries even are. I don't mean that in a harsh way, but it's like she sees family as an all-access pass to dump her problems on. No questions asked, with no limits. Right after I posted, I got a text from her. I was half expecting it to be some form of apology, or at least an acknowledgement of the way things had gone down. I've known Sarah my whole life, and I guess part of me always hoped she'd come around. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Her message was, well, not what I expected. She started with something like, "I know you're upset, but I really need your help. The kids have been driving me crazy, and I just need a break. I need to know you're there for me. You're the only one who understands." At this point, I was a little more prepared. I took a breath and thought about how I wanted to respond. I'd been working on being direct and not letting guilt dictate my actions, so I said something like, "I'm not able to help this time. I need to take care of my own life right now. You've always relied on me to pick up your slack, but I'm not going to do that anymore. I can't be your backup all the time." You know, in my head, I thought I was being calm and clear, but when I sent the message, I almost immediately started second-guessing myself. Was I being too harsh? Should I have just offered to help for a few hours instead of being so firm? A few hours later, I get another message from Sarah. It was longer this time, and, honestly, a lot more manipulative than the first. It wasn't just about her needing a break anymore. It was about me being selfish and inconsiderate. She threw out the typical guilt trip lines. You're the only person I can rely on. You know how hard this is for me. We're family. You're supposed to help your family. I won't lie. At first, it got to me. It always does when she pulls that family card. But this time, I caught myself. I sat down and read through the message again, and something clicked. Why was I allowing her to make me feel guilty? For not watching her kids when I had already made it clear I couldn't do it? Why did I keep letting her make me feel like I was a terrible person for simply setting a limit? I took a deep breath and let a few hours pass before I responded. I decided to keep things short and as clear as possible. Here's what I sent. I understand that you're overwhelmed, but that doesn't mean it's okay to pressure me into stepping in at the last minute. I've told you I can't help right now, and I need you to respect that. I love the kids, but I have my own life to manage, and I need you to start taking responsibility for yours. I'll admit, that was a tough text to send, but I needed to stay firm in my decision, especially because I knew if I caved once, it would only open the door for Sarah to keep taking advantage of me. Now, here's where things got even more complicated. Instead of just accepting what I said and moving on, Sarah started talking about me to other family members. She didn't reach out to me directly, but I started receiving texts and calls from my parents and aunts. My mom called me first. She was upset, asking why I was being so cold and refusing to help Sarah, especially when she's clearly struggling. I tried to explain that this wasn't about her needing help. This was about me being constantly called on to bail her out, and how I couldn't keep doing it. But like most of my family, my mom didn't seem to get it. She kept insisting that family supports each other no matter what, and that I shouldn't be so harsh. That was one of the most frustrating things, to be honest. It felt like no one was hearing me. They just kept treating me like I was the one in the wrong for setting a boundary. Next, one of my aunts called. Her message was more direct. She told me she'd heard from Sarah about the situation and that I was acting out of line for not stepping up when she really needed it. According to her, Sarah was doing her best with the kids, and I should have been more understanding. It was like they all missed the bigger picture. This wasn't about being a good sister or stepping in when someone needed me. This was about pattern behavior, about constantly being expected to drop everything for Sarah while she avoided the consequences of her choices. The most infuriating part of these conversations was when they said things like, "You don't even have kids, so you don't understand what it's like." Well, yeah, I don't have kids, but that doesn't mean my time and energy aren't valuable. It doesn't mean I'm obligated to shoulder the burden of someone else's responsibilities, just because I don't have children of my own. By the end of that week, I was drained. I felt like I was being gaslit by everyone I knew, and it was like no one cared to hear me out. But here's the thing. I'd promised myself I wasn't going to back down, and I stuck to it. I didn't let my mom or my aunt convince me to change my mind. I stayed firm in my decision. Update 3 weeks later. Okay, so to pick up where I left off, I've spent the last couple of weeks processing everything that's happened. I'm sure many of you can relate to the sense of being emotionally drained from trying to uphold a boundary, while everyone around you either doesn't understand or doesn't care. And I'm still in that process. Learning, adjusting, and sometimes feeling like I'm questioning myself. But here's the rest of what's gone down. So, after that week of family pressure, I decided to go a different route. I didn't engage with the group chat anymore. I didn't answer the calls from my relatives about the issue. I realized that if I kept responding to their guilt trips, it would only drag me back into the same cycle. And let's be real, getting stuck in the cycle wasn't going to help anyone, least of all me. Instead, I took a step back from all of it. I focused on myself and my own needs for a while, which, if I'm honest, felt like a radical act of self-care. I've spent so many years trying to be there for others that I've lost sight of what I need to be okay. So I've been doing things for me. Working out more regularly, spending time with friends who respect my boundaries, and even taking a mini vacation for myself, just to reset. It was refreshing and empowering to say no without feeling guilty about it. And then came the phone call from Sarah. I had been avoiding it, to be honest. I knew she was going to try to talk about the situation again, but I also knew I had to hear her out if I wanted closure on this. When I picked up, she didn't waste time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a real discussion about how things had gone down. Instead, she started by saying, "You know, I'm not going to keep begging you to help me, but I'm really hurt by how you're treating me. I don't get why you won't help me with the kids." At first, I was quiet. I knew where this was going. I was already mentally bracing myself for her to try and guilt-trip me some more, and sure enough, she launched into her usual spiel about how overwhelmed she is, how she doesn't have anyone else to turn to, and how I'm being cold and distant. But here's where I did something different. I interrupted her. I calmly said, "Sarah, I've heard this all before, and I've told you I can't help anymore if it's going to continue like this. You keep relying on me to step in at the last minute, and it's not fair to me." The conversation got heated, but I held my ground. I said, "I'm not asking you to do everything alone. I'm not saying I'll never help you, but I need you to respect my time and my boundaries. You can't just dump the kids on me whenever you feel like it and expect me to drop everything. That's not how this works anymore." There was a long pause. I could almost feel her trying to process what I'd said. And then she hit me with a comment that stung. "I just don't understand why you're doing this. We're family, and family is supposed to help each other out." That line again. Family is supposed to help each other out. It's always been Sarah's go-to when she's feeling backed into a corner, and it's a line that's always worked on me. But this time, I didn't fall for it. I said, "I am family. But I'm also a person with my own life, my own responsibilities, and my own needs. I can't keep putting myself last, Sarah. You have to start taking responsibility for your own life and your own kids." She didn't like that. The silence that followed was heavy, and when she spoke again, it was more subdued. "I guess you're right. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I'll try to do better." It wasn't an apology that I'd been hoping for, but it was something. She didn't admit to the manipulation, but she at least acknowledged that I had a point. We ended the conversation on a more civil note, and since then, things have been a little quieter on her end. Now, I'm not going to pretend like everything is perfect. My mom still doesn't really understand what I did or why I did it. She's continued to drop little comments here and there about how I should be more supportive of Sarah, and how family always has each other's backs. But she's been more distant with me than usual. That's been hard, to be honest. I never wanted to hurt my mom or alienate her, but it's also made me realize something. I've spent so much time prioritizing the needs of others, especially Sarah, that I've neglected myself. And that's something I need to address moving forward. Sarah hasn't asked me for last-minute help again, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time before she tries. When that happens, I'm ready. I've learned how to say no, and I'm not going to let myself get pulled back into the same exhausting cycle of guilt and manipulation. As for Ellie and Jake, I still miss them. I really do. But I know that the best thing I can do for them right now is to stay firm in my boundaries. I don't want them to grow up thinking that it's okay to burden others without regard for their well-being. I hope that, in the long run, Sarah can realize that too. Her kids deserve more than just a family that enables her to avoid responsibility. Anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm still learning how to put myself first and how to set boundaries without feeling guilty. It's not easy, but I'm getting better at it. Thanks again to everyone who took the time to offer advice or share their own experiences. It really helped me feel less alone in this whole mess. I'll update again if anything major happens, but for now, I think I've finally started taking control of this situation. Thanks for reading and take care. Remember to subscribe for more such videos.